Hello guys, I'm going to be talking about Milky Way. I previously already did a review on her, but that was before the new stones and before she got her nerf. So it actually does change a few things in the way you're going to build her and what use she's going to have. First thing you need to know with Milky Way is that technically she can be placed on any line. The thing is she doesn't have a good resistance, so you're usually going to want her to be in a 4-man line in mid, and that's where her bonuses are. I personally ran her front, but there's nothing wrong with the other lines. The only thing is putting her mid will require you to do a little bit more of a funky setup, but I did see some pretty interesting lines, so it is an option. So looking at her on a stat point of view, she's more a technique and speed-based player, meaning she's going to reflex, she's going to act fast, a decent amount of vitality, so she's going to live, but the power is still kind of low. Now let's go straight into the skills. With her E, she did get nerfed, but her active was buffed. So it's really good for strikers, especially knowing that critical rate is one of the current problems, especially with SOB, because you need to change your stones for it, the and or crit damage. So it's really nice because it's going to increase attack power and critical rate. The critical rate's the better part of the two by 45%. So for all of you, that basically means 2 to 3 crit stones in a single active. It only costs half a bar, it lasts for 20 minutes, so it's pretty good. The only thing is you want to have a striker who's not going to be KO'd right away, because then you're putting this active to waste. The best part is the next skill is action bar start, meaning she's usually going to start before your striker. The only exception to this, as always, is going to be Vanchi, because he can usually outspeed anything if well set up. Now, action bar starting at 30% is really great. I haven't maxed it out because in my case, she doesn't have any superbs. I haven't had any luck getting any up till now. And originally, I actually had her 2 superb and she had a recall, but this was a really long time ago. So action bar start 30% is just really nice. The only thing is you want to be really careful about this because since her action bar is always at 30%, it also means that when someone does an action, they're going to pass to the person with the highest action bar. And she is kind of weak to being attacked, so it's kind of dangerous to max out this skill. So depending on how strong your line is, I would actually even advise going for a 5-3-5-5 build until you 7-star her, who with her skills isn't that bad of a deal. Now, the next skill is going to be Smile Sprinkler. Now, I'm going to say we're going to take this with a note of salt because it does have a really cool effect, but the time limitation is just too big. Increase action speed by 15%, reflex by 15%, attack power by 15%. I mean, that's a great buff. On top of it, it stacks 3 times. So 45% action speed, 45% reflex. I mean, those are some insane totem effects, except they need to be done within 6 minutes or they will disappear. If you get KO'd, they will disappear. So there's a lot of chances that you won't be able to stack all 3. Now, one trick I use to increase the amount of stacks is I've built her for reflex, at least in the substones, and the way I'm using her is more of a reflex stealer. So if she does steal the ball, the fact of stealing will give her 1 stack, and then the fact of passing will give her a 2nd stack. Using her active doesn't change the amount of stacks. So she'll be able to do 2 stacks in a single action, which is kind of a trick you can use to really start maxing out on this. So it can be pretty cool if you can pull it off. Now, Belief of Light. Decrease damage and receive spirit by 45%. So the problem is that the damage is when attacking only. If it wasn't, it would be interesting. And it used to be 75%. So I was really good with that. But now that 45% just makes her feel so squishy. So this is one of the reasons why we're going to look at changing the stones. Also, a lot of stones got nerfed. So this also kind of makes her old build irrelevant. Now let's look at the stones. This is based on the very old build of action bar generation. As you know, there is a cap and the cap will add to her starting skill, but now I don't think it's actually possible to reach the cap unless you have another cap player like Kevin or anything who increases action bar at start, and I even think those skills can no longer stack, so they're really trying to stop us from using this skill. The old build was always Metatron's Will, Thunder Pen, Whirlwind Speed. Now, I'm not going to say anything against that old build. It's just the passives got nerfed so hard that the action bar from those, the penetration value, all the stones in this build got nerfed, every single one of them. And it now just doesn't feel so interesting anymore. Especially in PvE, because those guys don't have stones, so their stats are still buffed. So already, if you look, I was already running a little bit more of a funky version. I was using the old Will of Metatron's crit rate increase combined with Milky Way's other skills to have enough crit rate to be able to heal herself using a dark crit damage. It was working extremely well in PvE. In PvP, it was more kind of an iffy thing because sometimes they would just one-hit KO her, but using a Thunder Pen would have made literally no difference, so it wasn't that big of a deal. It just meant since she healed, she had a higher chance of trying to steal the ball and not play chicken. Now, what are the stones we're going to advise? So you need to know she has a light, thunder, and a Wormwind slot. The prime slot is kind of a more of an iffy question again. So let's get right into it. If we're looking at the stones, stone-wise, there are some new uniques that look really cool on her. So in the light section, I'm going to say directly, there isn't anything that great anymore. So I'm going to say throw in the reflex stones. If you don't have uniques that you need, you can always throw on her a Paradise of Light. You can throw on her a Metatron's Will. You can even throw on her a Thousand Watchers, but you got to be aware that all three of these stones are just no longer going to cut it, especially when you're comparing to their counterparts. So I'm always going to say throw in a nice light reflex. When you're done with the light reflex, some of the new uniques are pretty cool. So I'm going to say the ones that I'm the most interested in are the Thunder ones. There are two of them. So it's going to be Calm Icicle because it increases action speed, decreases incoming damage when holding the ball, increases attack power. It's just a really nice buff all around, giving her survival, giving her most speed, and in case she doesn't reflex, she's still going to hit them hard enough for the striker to be able to take them out when stealing. Now this is a very good alternative, and if you have it, you could run this on Milky Way without any problems. If you don't have this stone, or if you're just looking at another kind of build, there is lightning speed, increasing reflex, I think 30%. This allows a triple reflex stone build, and this is really nice when you're already running something like an Alice who's going to decrease reflex. So you've basically given up on everything except reflex. This isn't a bad build. It can work pretty well. The only thing you got to be aware of is you will normally not crit. So you're not going to be generating spirits from that, but you're going to have a pretty decent chance of out-reflexing the opponent. If they have any form of counterattack resistance, you've lost. It's just a fact. But currently, if she doesn't reflex, she dies anyway. So there isn't that big of a loss. The only thing is, if you were running Calm Icicle, you had a small chance of surviving. Now, if you weren't to run a unique stone in this slot, I would say there are actually a lot of interesting options. The top one, I would say, even through it doesn't sound like it, and this is more for frontline Oni, I would throw a Thunder pass effect because it increases reflex when being attacked, allowing her to have even more reflex. If not, there's also the Thunder damage resist, so damage critical resistance was kind of nice. And then you also got this one, Spirit when you're being attacked and decrease inflicted damage. Any of these free stones are pretty cool. So on a Wormwind note, I'm going to say her good old Speed Stone is kind of fine. There is increased action speed when holding the ball. It's just not that great. It's not going to cut it. The DR is also an option, but I'm going to say the good old speed is still kind of the best stone if you're not running a unique. And if you're running a unique, the new ones are not going to be interesting. You could be looking at Ancient Stormer, but this is going to make her so squishy that she's just not going to do anything. And the action bar is with an attack, so it feels like a loss of a slot. It's much weaker than the Thunder one. Or you could even grow Earth Scry. It's going to decrease the inflicted damage to a very nice degree, but again, this is going to be when attacking. So this is more something you're going to run in back or midline. In front line, it's completely useless. So again, take that with a note of salt because it depends exactly what you're running. Now, of course, if you could run this and somehow have the crit to be able to use a dark crit damage in the prime slot, this could make a very interesting build. So if I were to say, in my eyes, what is the best build for her right now, it would be a light reflex in the light slot, a light reflex in the prime slot, in the Whirlwind slot, a speed stone, and between these two Thunder uniques. I don't currently have all the stones necessary to do this, and when I don't mean all the stones, I'm missing the uniques. So until I get them, I'm going to keep running my funky build. It is still working really well. Just in higher leagues and Diamond, I was kind of dying a little bit too fast with Milky Way. So that's kind of what I'm going to be working on. Now, on a chain level, Milky Way doesn't have that great of chains if you're playing under the very meta standard way of life. A bunch of 3 and 4 stars, another bunch of 3 and 4 stars. I've never used him, but some people say he's decent. Again, don't see him that much, but he needs to be on your team, so like a light Whirlwind team could use this chain, I'm guessing. But the chain that really matters is this one, because it's going to increase reflex and action speed. If you've seen any of my videos or my PvP videos, I love Leah really, really much. So I have no issue with this chain whatsoever. But I do know that for a lot of people, she is unpopular. You do need to know how to build her. She doesn't run in Rainbow. You need Dual. It's kind of a really technical setup for her to actually work. But if you set her up correctly, she's just going to be a tank, penetrating through every line and not caring. Well, this isn't actually a Leah video, so I'm going to skip this. Now, on a skin level, she did get an event skin a while back. I like it. I really, really hate her EE skin. I think the part that annoys me the most is that she's eating for McDonald's. I don't know. It just, no. Her other skins were nicer, and I'm just going to stay with Traveling Milky Way. In no way do I even want to accept that there's an EE skin for her. Now, what teams is she going to work with? So I'm going to do this line per line. So this is going to be a little bit more technical. In front line, she's going to work very well with something that's based on reflex or something that's based on speed. So perfect for a Vonchi. She even has a chain with it. If you're running a Curran, if you're running a Ravian, that's kind of the lines you're going to want to put her front. The other lines, it's just not going to be worth it. Throw in a lane. Midline, you're going to be running something that has an extremely high concentration of light or reflex. So the most common thing you're going to find is Milky Way Ace, Veronica, Cheetos, Milky Way, and Duke. That's kind of like the reflex line you're going to see her in midline, and that can actually be pretty powerful, especially if you throw a 1000 Watcher. It is kind of interesting. On top of it, Cheetos is going to give a huge buff of speed. Duke's going to give crit. It can be really cool. In backline, I'm going to say it's more going to depend what you're trying to run, but it's going to be more of a reflex-based back, and usually you're going to try to have some form of heal, because the minute that she's out of healing, she's going to start being weaker. And she's not going to attack, who's kind of the way of the chickens, as I like to call it. So I hope this helps people understand exactly how Milky Way works. Again, mine is not EMSA, but I'll just do a fast match for you guys to see how she works. Here it's, well, League isn't really at the best point to show it anymore, but let's just terminate that poor team. In my team, basically the idea is that Vonchi strikes, and then at a few seconds later, Milky Way can steal, and then Balteon can steal using her buff. But this team was just too weak to show it. Later on, I'm going to be posting in the next season some videos of gameplay, so you're going to be able to see exactly how my team functions, and hopefully by then I can finally stick in Cheetos at his space. Just it's a question of stoning. The minute I get the unique I want, we're good. So have a good day, guys. And if you have any requests, any other question, just put a comment and I'll see what I can do.